Welcome back, my fellow executive dysfunctions. The name is Wolf, and what you're looking at is a video update to my Spark Charge Sorcerer. If you're just here for the time codes and whatnot, check the description box below. But while you do so, make sure to also hit that like button. I would appreciate it. But yes, this is, as I said, an update video. What you're looking at right now is gameplay of my very first, straight up, very first empowered monolith. It is very early days. I did not do one of those 24-hour hyper race, super sweaty experience grind. I'm too old for that. All right, I needed my sleep. But yes, we finally got the two mandatory uniques, the wand, the tri-wand, as well as the fragment of the enigma. We finally have a little bit of workable mana, although we're still a couple of hundred off from the bare minimum, which is 1,000. We're still missing a bunch of intellect, because if you play ARPGs, right, you know that stat stackers always require a bunch of gear before they really start to shine. And this is a stat stacker, both int and mana. Although it's starting to function, and we are clearing quite quickly, our single target damage is acceptable, courtesy of the means of Lightning Blast, triggering the enhanced guaranteed application of the spark charges, which we are applying with all the circle balls that are flying around, our static orb. It is working very well. The gameplay in general is very simple. You just evade, which auto-casts the static orb, as well as our Flame Rush, which will auto-cast the static orb. And then for single target, you just apply Lightning Blast. It's going to be very fast, it's going to be very strong, and should be very tanky once we get those stats stacked. And for those who are wondering about my Forge Guard, don't worry, I'm picking up pieces to the puzzle already. It's going to go very well once we switch to it, but that is going to be my next character. Right now, I'm very much enjoying my Sorcerer. So let's get into the thick of things and talk a bit more about it. So for those who are curious about my current life gear, this is the exact character after I did the empowered monolith successfully in Deathless, my very first one. So this is what we currently have. We're level 77. It's a little late because I did switch way too early from Glacier before I was ready, before I even had my mandatory uniques, and it went wrong a little bit. But yes, this is my current Scuffed gear. We have a nice mana hit, but of course we want the unique helmet that gives us base crit. I keep forgetting the name of it. We have a nice bone amulet for crit, but ultimately we want different stats on it. Crit multiplier is not what we're looking for right here. I want spell crit. We have a mandatory unique, the Tribal Electra. No LP yet, sadly, and no +3 lightning spells, so we definitely need to find a better one. A Scuffed chest, because I did have mana and int on it, but I want the mana base. So hopefully we find one usable soon. We have the second mandatory unique, the Fragment of the Enigma. This is one of the key pieces we are building around. This is what allows us to scale intellect and get massive benefits from that, obviously, as well as the passives that we have interact with this very lovely. We have the Phantom Grip. This is also one of the items I will be using for my my Forge Guard. But yes, this is probably the best ring you can get prior to a well-rolled Fond ring if you do go with the base crit helm. So I'm happy that I found this with the Nemesis system. Get some minion damage as well. So the Forge Guard is waiting, but until then, it is nice for us because we also get base crit on it for ourselves and some percentage mana. On top of that, we have a Scuffed belt that I just used for some of the resistances, but more importantly, the ward cleansing. I desperately need to replace this. We did manage to pick up a Yora Star Dial once we did the campaign skip for a poison res as well. Very good. We have some basic Scuffed bracers. Of course, I want the higher armor base as we have in the planner. But yeah, it has some armor, it has some intelligence, it has some mana. So I can't complain. I haven't found better after all. Transcendent Dress was a nice find early on. Lots of resistances, has some interaction with the mana and some additional movement speed. It's a very good item for pure mana stackers, which we are not. We will ultimately switch to the crit reduction para boots. But for now, this is nice, especially if you can get some LP on this. It's really nice. And then we have a very Scuffed intellect res mage relic that I desperately need to replace, but I haven't really been looking for them because I'm expecting to find the Weaver items, which is I want 2 Weaver rings and a Weaver relic, but I haven't found any. I did find a bunch of Weaver items, but none of them are for mages. Like, what am I supposed to do? Melee attack speed? Like, take a walk off a short pier, you know what I mean? Speaking of taking long walks off a short pier, we have some Scuffed relics. We did get some percentage armor and mana right here. We get 3 of those, but we didn't get the perfect idol yet because we want mana on it, I believe. We did manage to get some Lightning Aegis cast speed one as well, but no resistances on it yet, or lightning damage for that matter. I believe that's possible. We did find some mana and res here, mana and health, which is not really necessary, but I haven't really been finding a lot of good relics. So hopefully we'll soon turn that around as well, now that we have some good ranks in the Fortune faction, so hopefully that will turn around. So hopefully we'll get to that. However, if you want to know about the build that I'm actually planning, let's go into that. So before we dive into the thick of things, make sure to check the description box. If I do update the planner, I typically post it in the description box with like a date tag so you know what to expect. I am constantly changing and tweaking the build depending on how I am experiencing it and what works and what doesn't work. So keep an eye out, all right? So let's get with the skills. Nothing has really changed much, except for the fact that I opted for static orb here in the bottom, as opposed to using it through lightning attunement. We also want 3 points in atomic manipulation, just to help with some mana sustain, which I believe does trigger on the auto cast. So I have to test that some more, but it definitely works on the manual cast, which is always comfy. Scatter Blast, smaller orbs 4 is mandatory. Also the 5 out of 5 orbital fulmination is mandatory. If you don't have access yet to Prismatic Gaze, I can recommend just ripping out the 4 points in mana charged, so you don't have to worry about mana either. And then once you have it, you can just pump that up and start doing some real bloody damage. Other than that, I recommend the static orb to be as follows. Max out your mortal capacitor, get your final spark and cloud answer once you have your fragment of the enigma, as well as a certain passive, which is very mandatory, because once your static orb is over 40 mana cost, which will definitely be the case with 1 point in mana charge at the very least, in life that is, your passive from the sorcerer will trigger, and then you can blow things up with mortal capacitor and final spark really, really effectively, which is really, really nice. On top of that, we have some double and quadruple casts. We have some base crit, and then we pick up the additional chains that with convergence become really, really nice single target damage. So we have automated clear and then supported single target, which goes off very, very fast. Flame Ward in the end ultimately will be as follows. Some mana efficiency, duration, ward per second, ward retention. Of course, the damage reduction while the ward is active, some efficiency, and then we want at least 3 out of 5 mental aegis. Right now on life, I'm still using warmth because I don't have the mana to sustain it. But other than that, once we do, we will switch to a more mind over matter kind of effect for the tankiness, and that should make us very, very happy. Flame Rush, the mandatory beta decay, should speak for itself. Other than that, the Celestial Guidance is very good for the buff persistence, especially since we are picking up the Frenzy. Although I'm not sure about that. I don't feel like it's mandatory. If you have a better pick, by all means, pop off. We do pick up the mana efficiency and the cooldown recovery speed, because the more we can use it, the better. We're also picking up mana fused current, because we are mana stackers. So this is a little bit of extra damage, because there is not much else we can do right here. Because, yeah, this is more damage and area, which is nice. This is more shred, which I guess is probably your best bet, depending on how you want to get fire shred, although armor shred is more important for us. And you could also go with Ember Wake to get some additional hits, depending on how lucky you feel with the Enigma having an on-hit effect. But yes, it really depends on how you want to do it. It is entirely up to you. As long as you pick up the Beta Decay, the 3 points in Celestial Guidance, the 3 points in Runic Eclipse, you're pretty much good to go. Focus, however, make sure you pick up 4 points in Null Infusion and Null Pure, the 1 point in Null Profusion. That's a thing to say. And then time it correctly for a real nice chunk of mana while you're running out. This is going to help you sustain a lot until you have a tremendous amount of mana pool, so you no longer need it because of the passives, right? We're also picking up 5 points in Shocking Aura, because while we do channel, we didn't have massive damage reduction, which is very, very nice. A little bit of mana regen, because that's why we have focus ultimately. And if we do end up focusing quite a bit, we can recover some of our lost time moved with haste after channeling. I also picked up a little bit of armor and armor per intelligence, because we are an instacker, so we're a little bit more tanky while we channel. But other than that, it's mostly because of the Null Infusion and Null Profusion. If you time it correctly, it's almost instant. So that's it for the skills. In terms of the passives, this is where the magic happens. I opted for 2 and 8 Arcanist respectfully, 5 out of 5 Mage Flurry for the cast speed. I am debating if I want to spend these 5 points perhaps into Scholar for more health and, more importantly, raw mana, because we're no longer using Teleport. But the cast speed does feel kind of nice for Lightning Blast. I'm not sure how that feels once we have better gear, but it might be a case of like going Scholar. Since we are skilling Quit in the end, Knowledge of Destruction is the way to go. So we'll see how that turns out. In terms of Rune Master, we are picking up the 8 points of Sphere of Protection, 1 Unsealed Mana, Arcane Focus for the travel, which will give us access to the Transcendence for additional health, but more importantly, Ward per second, which is going to help us stay alive a little bit better. You could drop this, the Transcendence, and get more points in Arcane Focus if you would want to. That's also pretty good, because it's just more intelligence. But the actual ward per second is surprisingly comfy, especially with the way ward per second actually kind of was buffed due to the new ward decay formula, right? In a weird way. Mental Catalysis, Intelligence, crit reduction together with our gear. In the end, this is going to help out quite nicely to get us crit immune. And then we also have, of course, a wand, so that's a lot of crit multi through inscribed instruments. However, the stars of the show are in the Sorcerer. We pick up 5 calculated destruction for the spell crit scaling. We are picking up, of course, the bonus for ward per second per 10 max mana. So the more mana, the more ward per second we have. Very obvious. We're also picking up more mana regen per 100 max mana, which is very, very good as well. On top of that, we are lightning based, so we're picking up a travel node on Chronomancer like we do on the Rune Master, and then picking up the penetration and leech, which is very, very good. We're also picking up ward gate per current mana, which is very, very nice, because every single time we use a skill that costs 40 mana, we get this. Although I'm not sure if it's bugged. Sometimes I feel like it doesn't work with our current static orb, despite the fact that it's over 40 mana. More testing is required, because it feels like it might not work sometimes. So I'm a little bit of crit, because we do have 2 extra points here that we have to put in somewhere for travel nodes. I guess you could put it into just 2 extra intelligence if you would want to. But I opted for some more crit chance because it's doubled for lightning, and we are using lightning skills. We also have Arcane Obliteration for more crit multi. We are picking up 8 points of Arcane Insight for the Ward Decay threshold per int, which is just comfy, but also a bunch of intellect and travel nodes, which gives us access to more flat mana and the mind over mana base effect, the mana bulwark. This is where the magic happens. This is a mandatory skill that you, or a passive that you need for the build to function properly, especially through Static Orb. This is allowing Static Orb to constantly apply with 100% guarantee a spark charge, and perhaps even more because we have more than 100% spark charge application. On top of that, we also do lightning damage to shocked enemies with a little bit more percentage right there, as you can see, more damage. But yeah, the spark charges is where it is at. This is one of the mandatory hits, together with 3 points in Mana Well for the mana spent gained as ward and increased mana, together with the 5 points in Archmage. This is also one of the reasons we want 1,000 mana at the very least. More mana is always good because of all the mana scaling aspects in our skills and passive tree. But yes, once you have Archmage, 5 out of 5, 4 out of 5 Arcane Current, and 3 out of 5 Mana Well, you have the mandatory uniques, you could theoretically start doing the build, but I would wait until you have some like really, really good gear. Speaking of the gear we're still currently planning is the Prismatic Gaze for the flat crit and all the benefits, including Elemental Shred, which is also, as you can see, based around 40 mana, which is like that little threshold. We're looking to hit Static Orb, preferably on top of that Intellect in a perfect world. But yes, the world is rarely perfect. There's the Bone Amulet. We want mana, we want Spell Crit, we want Shred. That's going to be very important. Whatever resistances we need. And Frailty, if we can like seal that in, it's going to be nice defensively. The mandatory Tribal Electro, we're looking for Spell Crit. But any kind of like good stat is going to be helpful. Spell Crit is probably the best crit chance, but there is also lightning damage you could do. You could do some mana and mana regen. That's really nice. Mana and mana spent gained as ward is really good. There's a lot of spell damage is really, really nice as well. As you can see, tier 7, tier 61, 68. Like there's some really good options. But one of the things you want to get first is like getting your spell crit in the end close to or at least at 100%, so you crit constantly and always, right? And then once you have enough spell crit, you can opt for mana or other spell damage increases, or maybe even mana spent as ward and whatnot to help yourself out, as long as you finish off that crit. Here's the Fragment of the Enigma. This is the base we want for the Arcane Regalia that we talked about. As you can see, it's the percentage mana base with mana regen, which is going to be so nice. Such a good base for us. Intelligence mana, more armor, and then in a perfect world, increase spell critical strike chance if you have more than 300. If you can find that, that is probably the best mod you can slap on here. Alternatively, if you don't need mana, or you think you have more than 1,000 mana, you don't need more, you could go with mana spent gained as ward. But there is another good mod that allows you to have a greater mind over mana effect. Where is it? Level of mana strike. Damage dealt to mana before health. That's another good one as well if you want to lose some mana and go with that one. That's an alternative pick that I'm contemplating. In terms of font of the erased, we want intelligence, maybe some spell damage, maybe some critical strike chance, depending on what we can find. Depending on what is available. Lightning damage is also pretty good, of course. Mana regen is acceptable. But yeah, we definitely want the intelligence mandatorily, and then enough crit until we hit crit chance, and then we can just do whatever we want, damage or utility. And then, of course, the two other notes we can have here, as my voice is slowly going, is resistances. So whatever resistances we need, hopefully we can find them on the items, like Fizz, Necrotic, or Void, perhaps even Cold, because I still have Cold Res on the idols as well. And then we can round off on our gear with whatever we still need to finish it up. On top of that, we have a Predatorian Belt. Not sure about the belt yet. I think a good unique might go a long way too. But yeah, lightning damage, mana regen, armor reduction, or armor and crit reduction, as well as cooldown recovery. And then in a perfect world, we would also find the ward and then seal that so that our potions become cleansing, which is very, very good. In terms of the Eternal Gauntlets, nothing has changed here. Intelligence mana, apply the shred, the armor, the mitigation, because we do skill a little bit of armor for defenses, and then doing that against dots as well is going to be so very, very, very good. In terms of the boots, intelligence, movement speed, armor, very simple, very straightforward. We're just doing this to get the reduced bonus damage taken from critical strikes, which is very, very nice, and high armor. And we have the knowledge of the erased, intelligence mana, and then whatever we need in terms of resistances. So we have a lot of suffixes available for the resistances, which is very, very nice. And then in terms of the blessings, we're still going with critical strike multiplier, poison res. You could go for all res if that's ending up being better for you. We also have the armor. We have the increased armor. You could go for, if you prefer mana on your chest, you can maybe drop the mana here. It's a lot of mana though. It's a lot of mana. And then you could maybe go for lightning damage, or perhaps more applicable. Where's the shred? Where's the lightning shred? Here, chance to apply shred lightning resistance on it. That's also a pretty good one to have. Although it's less important because we already have shred resistances through the prismatic gaze right here. So it's not really that important. The armor is nice. The armor here too, really, really nice. You could go for endurance as well, which is very capable, very good, very solid. And then crit multi, because we are a crit based build, and once we have close to or 100% crit, this is going to be a massive bump in damage. So that's definitely what you want to do. And that's kind of what the build is right here, together with the expected mana armor and mana idols 4 times. The cast speed on the Aegis with whatever resistances we need. And if we have all the resistances, we can also go damage. And then we finish it off with more mana and whatever resistances we need. Very simple, very straightforward. That's kind of what it is. Nothing has changed too much. Little tweak here and there, some possibilities. But yes, that's currently the plan. Keep an eye out on the description box for any updates. I'm going to keep grinding. I'm going to try to get my rank up in the Fortune boys, so I can start maybe getting some better LP. And most importantly, get myself a knowledge of the erased mage and double fonts. That's really going to be very nice if I can get my hands on that with some good rolls. Intellect, mostly. Anyway, and mana. And mana, most importantly, mana. I think mana is actually more important than intellect until you have 1,000. Anyway, having that said, thank you so much. I'm going to keep gaming. Keep an eye out. My next character is probably going to be a Forge Guard, so if you're looking forward to that, stick around, and I will catch you guys next time. Have a good night. Take care. I am out.